The airport was buzzing with the hustle and bustle of early morning travelers. Business people with briefcases rushed by, families struggled to control excited children, and tired tourists walked slowly, clutching overpriced coffee cups. Amidst all this, a man stood out, not due to any noticeable difference in his behavior, but because of the red cap resting atop his head. The bold white letters on it read MAGA. He appeared to be in his early 50s, with graying hair at the temples and a well-fitted navy suit. In one hand, he held a leather briefcase, and in the other, a boarding pass. His expression was calm, unfazed, as he made his way toward Gate C-23 at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. A young flight attendant glanced his way, her face tightening. She adjusted her uniform, took a step forward, and blocked his path to the boarding line. "Excuse me, sir," she said curtly. "We have a policy of neutrality here. I'm going to have to ask you to remove your hat before you board." The man tilted his head slightly and met her gaze, showing no sign of aggression. "Sorry, I wasn't aware of such a policy," he replied politely. "This hat represents my personal beliefs, and I'm not causing any trouble." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Regardless," she said, "we can't allow items that could be seen as political or divisive. Either you take it off, or you won't be allowed to board." A few people in the line nearby turned to look, whispers spreading quickly. Some passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances, while others pretended not to notice, clearly uneasy about the growing tension. The man remained calm. "I understand your concern, but I'm not trying to make a statement. I'm just here to catch my flight," he said, his tone steady, as if he had dealt with similar situations before. But the flight attendant stood firm. "Sir, this is your last warning. Remove the hat or step aside." The man paused, not arguing. Instead, he moved out of the line slowly, deliberately. The whispers grew louder, and passengers leaned in to watch as she, with a rigid posture, called for security. Two uniformed officers arrived soon after, their faces unreadable. They spoke briefly to the flight attendant and then escorted the man away from the gate. He walked without protest, briefcase in hand, the same faint smile on his face as when he had first approached the gate. The stewardess exhaled sharply, brushing a stray hair from her face. A woman in line, a young mother with a baby strapped to her chest, murmured to her companion, "That seemed unnecessary." Another man further back muttered under his breath, "Good riddance." The tension in the air was thick, an uncomfortable silence that hung over the passengers as they waited. No one noticed a small group of airline employees whispering nervously in the corner, glancing at their phones. "Did you see the email?" one asked, and the other nodded, trembling, as they replied, "We need to tell her now." The flight attendant, still shaken but maintaining her professionalism, began organizing the boarding process. As passengers shuffled forward, her colleagues gathered around her, whispering louder and shooting her anxious glances. "What's going on?" she demanded, her voice sharp. One of the gate agents hesitated, clutching his tablet as though it were a shield. I think you need to see this," he said, his face pale, tilting the screen toward her. On it was an urgent email from the airline's headquarters. She skimmed the message quickly, her brow furrowing, and then froze. The words seemed to echo in her mind. "New CEO, frequent traveler, special guest on Flight 328, red hat as signature attire." Her breath caught in her throat, and she muttered, "This has to be a mistake," shaking her head as though trying to clear the thought from her mind. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Across the terminal, the man was seated in a less crowded area. He appeared unbothered, still wearing the red cap, his briefcase neatly beside him, and his calmness began to draw curious looks from other passengers. The stewardess turned back to the gate agent. "Where is he now?" she asked, her voice lowered but urgent. "Did they escort him off the premises?" The agent shook his head. "No, he's still here. They just moved him out of the immediate boarding area." She sighed, trying to maintain her composure. "Okay," she said, "I'll talk to him. We can fix this before it gets worse." But it was already too late. Passengers had overheard parts of the exchange, and their phones were out, capturing the moment. Social media posts began spreading. Man with MAGA hat removed from flight. Drama at the gate as airline confronts MAGA supporter. By the time the stewardess approached him again, The man had already noticed her. He stood up as she arrived, his gaze calm as ever. "Sir," she began, forcing a smile, "I'd like to personally apologize for what happened earlier. There seems to have been a misunderstanding regarding our policy. I'd be happy to assist you back onto your flight." The man looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "No misunderstanding," he said evenly. "You made yourself very clear." The weight of his words lingered, far heavier than they seemed. The stewardess felt her face flush with embarrassment and guilt. "Please," she insisted, "we'd like to make this right." The man's small smile returned, but it wasn't smug or vengeful. It was polite, even kind. But in his eyes there was something else. Quiet confidence. "Thank you," he said, his tone unwavering. "But I'll wait. I'm sure we'll have a chance to speak again under different circumstances." She nodded silently, unsure of what else to say, and turned back toward the gate. The whispers among her colleagues had grown louder, and she knew whatever chance she had to control the situation was slipping away. Back at the gate, the stewardess returned to her post, but her mind raced. The email replayed in her thoughts like a constant drumbeat. Each passing second felt heavier than the last. Then the phone rang. The gate agent picked up and turned pale as he listened to the voice on the other end. "Yes, ma'am," he stammered, glancing at the stewardess. "She's right here. I'll put her on." He handed her the phone with a resigned expression. "It's corporate," he said softly. "They're not happy." The stewardess took the phone, her voice shaking slightly as she said, "This is Lisa." A firm, no-nonsense voice came through the line. "Lisa, this is Amanda Reynolds, Senior VP of Operations. We have a serious problem. Were you aware that the passenger you removed is Mr. Carter Mason, the incoming CEO of our airline?" Lisa's stomach dropped, the weight of the moment hitting her all at once. She tried to speak but couldn't. "I wasn't informed of his identity," she stammered. "I was just following the policy." "That policy doesn't apply here," Amanda interrupted, her voice ice cold. "Mr. Mason is not only our new CEO, but he's also one of our most valued frequent flyers. And now, because of your actions, this incident is already going viral. Damage control is underway, but this will reflect poorly on everyone involved, especially you." Lisa's cheeks burned as Amanda's voice continued. "I expect you to personally apologize to Mr. Mason and do everything in your power to make sure he feels respected. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Lisa managed to whisper, the call ending abruptly. She lowered the phone, feeling the weight of her colleagues' stares. She straightened her uniform and marched toward the waiting area where Mr. Mason was seated, every eye on her as she approached. He looked up as she arrived, his expression still calm, but with a flicker of curiosity. "Mr. Mason," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I'd like to extend my sincerest apologies for what happened earlier. I wasn't aware of your position, and I deeply regret my actions." He motioned for her to sit, his tone polite but firm. "Have a seat," he said. Lisa sat nervously on the edge of the chair. "It wasn't personal," she added quickly. "I was just following what I thought was company policy." "And do you enforce this policy equally?" he asked, his voice measured. "Would you have reacted the same way if it had been a different hat, a different message?" Her silence answered for her. She opened her mouth to speak but found no words that felt honest. "Bias can be subtle," he said quietly, "but it's always there, shaping how we treat others. It's something we all need to recognize and correct." Lisa swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Before she could gather her thoughts, Mr. Mason stood, extending his hand. "I appreciate your apology," he said, "but I think this needs to be addressed on a larger scale. I'll be speaking with corporate about how we move forward." He shook her hand briefly and turned to leave. Lisa watched him go, dread settling in her chest. She had no idea what was coming, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. Meanwhile, Mr. Mason returned to the lounge area, his demeanor unshaken. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a notebook, and began jotting down his thoughts. He wasn't out for revenge, but he wasn't going to let the incident slide either. He saw it as an opportunity to address a deeper issue within the company. By the time the plane was airborne, the incident was already trending online. The viral videos sparked debates, with some defending Lisa's actions as enforcing neutrality and others condemning her behavior as discriminatory. The airline's official Twitter was flooded with demands for explanations. Meanwhile, Mr. Mason ignored the messages coming from the executive team. He knew they were scrambling to contain the PR nightmare, but his focus remained on crafting a solution that would address the issue on a deeper level. The next morning, a formal apology was issued by the airline, acknowledging the mishandling of the situation. It also included a promise to implement mandatory sensitivity and bias training for all staff. As for Lisa, she was called into a meeting with her supervisor in HR, where the full weight of her actions was laid bare. She wasn't fired, but she was placed on probation and required to attend additional training sessions. The experience left her shaken, but it also forced her to confront her own biases. In the weeks that followed, the airline worked closely with Mr. Mason to roll out new training programs. Employees were encouraged to share their experiences and perspectives, fostering an open dialogue about bias and professionalism. Some applauded the effort, while others saw it as performative. For Mr. Mason, it was a step in the right direction. A month later, the incident continued to reverberate throughout the airline industry, and the story became a cautionary tale about unchecked bias. For Mr. Mason, it marked a defining moment early in his tenure as CEO. At the next company-wide meeting, he addressed the employees directly, talking about leadership, personal growth, and the need to ensure fairness and respect in every interaction. He closed by introducing a new initiative, Flight Path Forward, designed to promote inclusivity, respect, and professional development. Over time, Lisa became an advocate for fairness, using her story as an example of personal growth. For passengers who witnessed the incident, the viral videos served as a reminder that how we treat others in moments of conflict says more about us than them. For Mr. Mason, the red hat remained a quiet symbol of resilience, a reminder that leadership requires empathy, humility, and the courage to lead by example. Moral of the story: judgments made in haste often lead to regret. True leadership lies in inspiring positive change and respecting others, regardless of their differences.